Ladies, gentlemen, and arisen of all ages, when it comes to Dragons Dogma 2, especially once you reach a bit deeper into the game and start making your way into Battahli, the game can start to become really quite challenging based around a couple of different things. The first is how much time you spend killing stuff, purely the level that you have in your vocation rank up to this point in the game, as you can easily overlevel it quite a bit if you want to, or you can easily underlevel it if you just sort of focus story quests a bit too much too. The second part is how much time that you spend managing your actual equipment, whether it be looking for things out in the wild or farming loads of gold so that you can buy them from vendors. Then there are upgrades around nearly every corner, and while the game doesn't necessarily expect you to have the best things the second that you can get them, the balancing of it is definitely aware of the stock of each vendor at various points, but also various other things too, such as the topic of today's video, which is specific levels and types of equipment upgrades that you should have available at different points in your progression as well. So today what we're going to do is go in depth and all in that last part right there, because every weapon can be upgraded up to 4 times, technically speaking, if you count the dragon forging at the end, which everyone has to do the same way. And to actually do so along the way, not only do you need a nice little pile of gold and sometimes hard to find materials too, but you also need to be aware of what your actual options are, because upgrading your weapons and armor improves them in general, of course, but depending on where you choose to upgrade them, the actual result can be startlingly different, which is a system called smithing styles. And while most people know about 2 of these styles, there are definitely a good amount of people who also know that there is a 3rd style, but the vast majority of the community still seems to be completely unaware that there's actually a 4th smithing style in the game for further upgrades. So let's dive into the smithing styles themselves and talk about what they are and what they are best for. Then let's talk about the upgrade materials required for the weapons and a little bit of information on how to go about farming them. First, let's talk about the styles themselves at a base, what they actually want you to think, but there will be proper actual numerical comparisons in a minute too once we're done summarizing them. The first style that you will come across in the game is Vermundian. Upgrading weapons and armor at vendors marked with the Vermundian smithing style at the top will give you a balanced increase to your stats, meaning it will split the upgrade across the various kinds of stats that an item has. This is meant to be your sort of beginner style. You won't use this for much once you unlock all of the other ones, but some personal recommendations for this are armor in general, at least early in the game if you just want to be non-specifically tanky, as the style will raise both physical and magic defense somewhat equally rather than focusing fully on one. And the other option for this is either weapons that have magical affinities and boons baked into them, or just weapons for vocations that focus a mix of strength and magic, mostly mystic spearhand and magic archer. The reason for this is their weapons actually benefit from both strength and magic, so of course getting a balanced increase is actually really good for them. As for permanently booned weapons, they do have a magic stat to represent the elemental portion of them as well, and by raising both of these you can increase your overall damage a fair bit more than you would by just focusing on strength, even if we're talking about a big elemental hammer on a warrior. You can just sort of focus physical attack to just make that part stronger, or you can go balanced Vermundian style to also increase the fire damage too. Then we have our second smithing style, which is going to be Battahli. This is specific to the general smiths around Battahli, of course, and while Vermundian smithing style is focused on balance, Battahli is focused on the physical side of things, specifically boosting strength on weapons and physical defense on your armor, at the cost of gaining much less magic and magic defense on the same items. This is what you want on your weapon most of the time for any class that focuses strength over magic, at least until you unlock one of the later styles here. The exception, again, is also permanently elemental booned weapons, just because they can gain both of these stats, and they do benefit from both as well. But even then, it depends if you want to specifically focus more of one over the other. For armor, I would say this is a great upgrade for fighter and warrior, more so than anyone else, just because these two are going to be taking a lot of hits at melee range more often than not, and most melee range hits are going to be physical damage more so than magic, so this sort of helps build your defenses towards your position in the party. But there's also another very viable option for this that we'll be talking about in a moment. Then the second set of smithing styles have to be somewhat unlocked, with one of them being Elven smithing, which is locked to a singular location that you have to just sort of find in the world. The Sacred Arbor, which is the elf village within the game. I'll be showing the location of it on screen, so you should look away unless you want to see it, in which case it will be on there in 3, 2, 1, and there is just a blacksmith within this area who will enhance your equipment with the Elven smithing style, which is the precise opposite of Battahli style, focusing heavily on increasing your magic and magic defense stat while leaving strength and physical defense a bit behind. For weapons, this is obviously incredible for anything that focuses magic above other things. Things like sorcerer and mage will love this smithing style, but any magic damager can consider this depending on how they want to lean overall. As for armor, this is my least recommended armor upgrading style just overall. The only vocation I think you could even argue it for in the first place is maybe Thief with their auto dodge skill on, as this will make you dodge most physical damage naturally, so you just have a higher percentage of your damage intake being magical than other vocations, as that is just much less dodgeable. Then the final smithing style that I haven't seen people talking about much actually at all is Dwarven, and this is unlocked through an interesting quest line. First step, you have to get to this location here, which is the Agamen Volcanic Island. You cannot go through the top side of this from Battahli early in the game for story reasons, but you can actually just run around the southern side through here quite easily through a sort of long cave. And once you reach the marker on the road that I have here, you will find a dwarf who's in pain. Talk to him and you will initiate a quest, at the end of which he asks you to visit his house. This ends with you agreeing to escort him to the hot springs. Do this and a number of things will happen afterwards, including unlocking the magic archer vocation, as this is where it is sitting. But also, if you then return to the house of that dwarf after the fact, after completing this, he will offer to upgrade your equipment with the final smithing style. What this style offers then is completely different to the others, giving you lesser strength and magic and also defense upgrades too, but instead focusing on raising your knockdown power and knockdown defense as much as possible, which is actually incredibly good. It may seem a bit anticlimactic at the surface, but think about when you are fighting enemies, how much that does actually matter. Knockdown power on your weapons lets you stagger smaller enemies really easily, making them inconsequential, but it also is what lets you send larger enemies off balance, giving you larger periods to do free damage, and the more often that you get these staggers, the more damage that you can actually do as a result. On the other hand, higher knockdown defense on your gear means that you get staggered out of your attacks less frequently. This is awesome for something like, say again, a fighter or a warrior who's living up on the front lines, taking all the melee attacks from your enemies. So if they have higher knockdown defense, they get staggered less, and they can actually cleave through all the enemies as a result without being flinched. So this is an incredibly tactical consideration of an option, really. I would say if you have any members of your party that are more dedicated to a tank style role than damage, you want this to be on their weapon. It just creates openings for the more damage oriented party members, which is great, and honestly it's pretty good for everyone, as we'll go over in a moment. For defense, honestly, it's just sort of the best one, let's be honest here. As far as the actual gains, we'll go over the specific numbers momentarily, but essentially what happens here is the actual difference in stat gain is not significant enough between the other styles, Vermundian, Elven, and Battahli, to actually make the fact that they don't get the knockdown resistance worth it, because the knockdown resistance that you get is significant and you still get a pretty fair amount of physical and magic defense from Dwarven Style too. So Dwarven is essentially just the best defense one, let's be honest. It just happens to unlock a bit later in the game. All in all, the point of this is to say that these are your options for upgrading your equipment, and while you can just blindly upgrade and still have stronger weapons than you would otherwise, you can get much more specific with this than you might expect, and putting the effort into doing it right in the right locations can lead to a noticeable power increase over not. As far as a more direct comparison then, I bought a few swords from a vendor, but then I soon realized that basic swords obviously don't have any magic stat on them, and so they won't gain any. So instead I had to crack and buy some mystic spearhand weapons that were a bit more expensive to take advantage of their well-balanced stats. But then I brought them to each of the different smiths, one for each style, to look at a couple of upgrades for them to come away with a bit more information for you all. After all, the information up to here is mostly just the tooltips and what you would associate these things being good for as a result, so let's look at some actual numbers that I gathered. For Vermundian Style, when upgrading the Gnostic Wings helmet, I gained 4 defense and 4 magic defense for the first rank, then 4 defense and 5 magic defense for the second rank. As well, worth noting, the weight did decrease with each rank as well, making it a more manageable loadout from that. The same item in Battahli Smithing Style gained 4 of each for the first rank as well, so exactly the same, but then started diverging with the second rank gaining 5 physical defense and only 4 magic defense, but it did gain a bit of weight instead of losing weight. The same item in the Elven Style was again 4 of each stat raised for the first rank, but then 4 defense and 6 magic defense for the second upgrade, so you can see it leans slightly more that direction there. But then the final style, Dwarven, gains 4 of each on the first upgrade, but also a good bit of knockdown resistance, so the same numbers as the other ones but extra bonuses, and then 4 of each on the second one too, which is not much less than them, and also more knockdown resistance. The weight also does increase with Dwarven Style smithing, the same as Battahli, so that is your main consideration there, but the main takeaway here for armor, at least in my opinion, is always get at least your first upgrade in Dwarven Style. You get the same other stats but also get knockdown resistance, though the discrepancies do change a little bit as you get to further upgrades, but honestly, the difference of knockdown resistance is such a big deal that I think it's worth going Dwarven over anything else pretty much the entire time. Unless you get to a point where you start getting one-shot by enemies because you're lacking that extra defense, it will always be better to have the knockdown resistance. It's as simple as that. As for weapons then, we have this Percipient Blade, as it has both strength and magic attack. Vermundian Style, first rank has plus 15 strength and 15 magic, 15 of each, and the second rank is plus 21 strength and magic both, and like for armor, weight does go down a little bit with this style. The final strength and magic split of 2 upgrades for Vermundian Style within my build, of course, being 385 strength, 360 magic, and 1.77 weight. For Battahli Style, first rank, we gain 16 strength, so only minimally more, really, but then 8 magic, which which is a significant loss compared to Vermundian. Then the second rank though is 25 strength and 21 magic for the total stats again, which after those two upgrades being 390 strength, 348 magic, and the weight went up to 1.99, which is also a notable difference here. Moving to Elven Style smithing then, rank 1 gained 8 strength, 16 magic, so the exact inverse of Battahli Style. Then rank 2 gained 16 strength, 25 magic, so again the exact inverse of Battahli. And the stats of this were 373 strength, 365 magic, and it went down to 1.77 weight. Then for our final style, and this is where things get really funky, Dwarven weapon rank 1 gained 15 strength, 50 magic, 43 knockdown power. Rank 2 gained 21 of each main stat, but then also 54 knockdown power. So the same stat gain as Vermundian, but the knockdown power on top of all of that too. And the full stats for this one to compare are 389 strength, 366 magic, 1.99 weight, so the same as Battahli, but an overall gain of 97 knockdown power over the two upgrades, which is pretty hefty in itself for sure too. It's worth noting though from my other testing, these numbers are the result of using a weapon that is inherently balanced. Essentially, anything that only has magic, you do want to Elven upgrade if you're looking for pure damage. Anything that is purely strength, you want to enter Battahli upgrades for raw damage, or Dwarven upgrade for similar strength gain with knockdown power on it, which is also great for melee especially. And in a balanced weapon type or any weapon with a permanent boon, you do want to go Dwarven unless you have sort of weight balancing issues. But for pure min-maxing of effectiveness, it is just the ideal style really, as it gets the same stat upgrades as Vermundian does, which is pretty solid, but then trades the weight loss of it for a massive gain in knockdown power, which will also give you bonus staggers and bonus damage as a result of all of that. The other thing that this testing has shown is that every first upgrade, no matter where you do it, will cost only gold, nothing else. The other upgrades past that though are all either monster or gatherable materials of varying rarity, but most importantly, each style has their own required materials for each different upgrade level, and every single weapon has different requirements for this on top of that too. So while there is no direct easy way to tell you what your desired weapon will require, other than gold, of course, it will require a lot of that, we can go for a couple of good tips that I have for you in general. Obviously, if you want a specific material, your goal is to farm the specific enemy that will drop it. Any larger enemies, like bosses, will have set spawn locations and respawn after a few rests of in-game time, so if you want to farm one specific one, all you need to do is find one of them and then repeat this process until you have the required materials. We might even have a guide coming out in the next few days on locations for some of the rarer monsters across the game. For smaller enemies though, they are a little bit more random, other than having general locales that they stick to within the map, but there is an augment that you can unlock with Magic Archer in one of the earlier ranks for it, and then you can apply this augment to whatever vocation you want, and what this will do is give you an increased material drop rate from non-boss enemies, which is pretty much just made for this. The other main thing that you can do is get yourself a pawn with the Forager specialization, which makes them mark upgrade materials on your map actively so that you don't just run past them at any point in your gameplay, which is especially nice for the rare rocks or gems in the game. You can search for a pawn that has the specialization in the Rift specifically, even able to check Capcom official pawns, which will definitely have it if no wild ones happen to do so. Or you can even get this for your own pawn by raising your affinity with Malcolm, who is the caped child living in the Vernworth slums. That pretty much does it then everyone, just a full deep dive on smithing styles, talking about the lesser known fourth style in the game, which is honestly sort of the best one overall if we're being real, and then also just going in depth on testing them against each other on the same equipment to see some of the actual differences between them, rather than just the non-specific tooltips at the top of the screen. Generally speaking, for armor, it's pretty clear cut to me that Dwarven is just the best above all else, given that the defense and magic defense gain is still very close to the other styles, but the knockdown resistance will save your life a very large amount if you're able to stack enough of it between your armor pieces. For weapons, it is a little bit more complex, with purely magic weapons preferring Elven Style, and nearly everything else preferring Dwarven, with the exception of sometimes strength people preferring Battahli if you just want pure damage without the knockdown gain. But let's be real, it's worth noting that even at the tippity top level of upgrades, the difference of magic stat between an Elven upgraded Archistaff and a Dwarven upgraded one is only like 6%, so it's not massive at all, but the knockdown power will go up from 120 to 210, which is an insanely large upgrade in that specific stat. So while Dwarven isn't better for pure damage, knockdown power can really add up if you decide to go Dwarven, no matter what type of vocation you're playing. If you literally just want damage number higher, though, you should probably stick to Elven or Battahli upgrades, but trust me when I say the more knockdowns you get, you will get more damage overall than 6% can ever dream of being, statistically speaking. So just consider how you want to play the game really. I'm just here to provide the raw information itself, but you can do whatever you want with it. I hope you've all enjoyed this and hopefully it helps you out in your journey so you know just how to upgrade the weapon that you enjoy the most the way that you want for your playstyle. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, time. Stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.